Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, the show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Welcome to the Not Old Better Show Prevention Magazine Healthy Living interview series on radio and podcast. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and today's episode is brought to you by Acorns, the financial wellness app that makes it easy to start investing for your retirement. And it's great to have you with us today. Today, we are cutting through the noise of diet culture, food guilt, and outdated health myths to talk about something truly life-changing. How we nourish ourselves as we age. Important topic for those of us in the Not Old Better Show audience. You know, for many of us, food has been tangled up in decades of rules, restrictions, weight loss fads. But what if we could break free from all of that? What if our relationship with food wasn't about shrinking ourselves, but about thriving at any age, in any body? My guest today is Taylor Wolfram, who is a registered dietitian. She's a nutrition expert and a fierce advocate of something I just love: weight inclusivity with an anti-diet approach to health. This is fantastic stuff. You are really going to enjoy Taylor Wolfram. She specializes in vegan nutrition, but not in the way you might think. Forget the fear-mongering about carbs, oils, or plant-based perfection. Taylor Wolfram believes in abundance, satisfaction, and freedom from food guilt. All great stuff. We will dive into the power of plant foods as we age, how phytoestrogens, remember that term, phytoestrogens, can support women through menopause, and why a weight-neutral approach to health is the key to longevity here, not another restrictive diet. We'll also challenge the idea that veganism is just another wellness trend and explore why true well-being is about body liberation. That's one of Taylor Wolfram's terms, body liberation, not body size. So, whether you're a vegan curious, or just looking for a healthier, more sustainable way to eat, this conversation is for you. Get ready for some truth bombs, some myth busting, and a whole new way to think about food and aging. This is the Not Old Better Show, Prevention Magazine, Healthy Living interview series on radio and podcast. I'm Paul Vogelzang. Stay with us. Taylor Wolfram, welcome to the program.
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. I think so many in our audience are thinking about diet, especially this time of year, and we're all starting to spend a little bit more outside. But many in our audience are very focused on, kind of diet as it relates to their own, kind of natural clocks, and in particular, the condition of menopause. We've talked about it a lot on this program. You do a fair bit of work in this area, along with your work on diet and other subjects. And I really just want to jump right in and talk over this subject of menopause, because I think as it relates to aging, certainly it's a biggie. And when you think about one of the specialties that really as a registered dietitian you focus on, that's a plant-based diet, there are even more ramifications and more nuances to it. So I wonder if you can give us some of the kind of behind the scenes glimpse of kind of a plant-based diet as it relates to some aging and why it's important for us to think about. It's a long setup, long question. I apologize that we're talking about aging and menopause. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'm so happy to get into it. I think it's important to start by saying that there's no standard definition of the term plant-based diet. And for anyone who is listening and is interested in the benefits of plant foods, you can enjoy those benefits without eating, a 100% plant-based or vegan diet. So just know that you are still getting the benefit, even if it's just adding more plants or making some substitutions here or there. You don't have to completely turn your life upside down or, never eat meat again. Although, people have their reasons for doing that. So when it comes to, nutrition as we get older, and in particular women and, the massive hormonal shifts that we go through, there are a few things, that are helpful. From my perspective as a registered dietitian, I'm always going to promote eating, balanced meals consistently throughout the day. Like that's number one for everyone, is to just make sure, we're getting well-balanced nutrition on a regular basis. And that's really important, going through menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause as well. But when we look specifically at plant foods, there's a few things that can be particularly beneficial. Number one is fiber. Most folks have probably heard fiber's great for us. It's great for our gut. It's linked to better heart health, right? It's so awesome. Fiber only comes from plant foods. So when you're thinking of where do I get my fiber, that's coming from not only your fruits and vegetables, but your whole grains, your nuts and seeds, and your legumes. Legumes are beans, peas, soy foods, things like that. So the more you load up on plant foods, the more fiber you're getting naturally without even having to think so much about it or take a supplement or count grams of fiber or anything like that. And particularly when we're shifting some protein choices to plant-based proteins, that's a way to take a non-fiber containing food like meat. And when we're shifting it to a plant-based protein like a bean or tofu or something like that, there's fiber coming along with it. So it doesn't just have to equate to eating more fruits and vegetables. So fiber is something that's going to come with all, whole plant foods. So that's a great benefit right out the gate. We also hear about phytoestrogens, and this is the compound in some plant foods that it is not estrogen, because that can kind of freak some people out. And there's a lot of old kind of misinformation about phytoestrogens and cancer risk. And we know now that that's, not the case. They're totally safe to consume, before, during, after, cancer. But they can be helpful for some folks with menopause symptoms. So for people who are in perimenopause and are really suffering, with the vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes, things like that, phytoestrogens can be really helpful. They're rich in foods like soy foods, so your tofu, edamame, as well as flax seeds. And I will say the research is mixed on it, and we're still learning about it, but different folks, their bodies just handle phytoestrogens a little bit differently. So for some people, like I have a client who swears by like her morning glass of soy milk. Like if she does that, her hot flashes aren't as bad that day. For other people, they might not notice as significant of an impact. And I think it's important to just play around, have some trial and error. And there's foods like tofu, for example, where you're getting the phytoestrogens, you're getting fiber, you're getting heart healthy plant fat. A lot of tofu is made with calcium, so that's great for bones. It's rich in protein, also important for bones. So there's a lot of ways that we can get what we need from plant foods.
Thank you. That's really helpful. One of the things that I found in my research of you that I was just so impressed with, Taylor, is this idea that you have about weight, because weight produces so much, stigma in our world. There's so much fear over weight gain. We all aspire to be a specific weight, regardless of male or female. But it just is this crazy thing. And you have this really nice way of putting it. You talk about being weight inclusive, which I just think is brilliant. I just love that. And you have an anti-diet approach. So explain to us what you mean by that and how that really can help us as we're navigating some of this shift and transition towards plant-based.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I'm so passionate about.
Yeah.
In my own practice and just, professionally, I think it's so beneficial for everyone, especially when we're looking at healthcare. Weight inclusive means we're not treating people differently depending on their weight, right? We're giving everyone the same options, high quality, fair, dedicated treatment, diagnoses, everything like that. But it also means that I'm not going to see someone who may be in a larger body and assume what they're eating or how they're exercising or automatically tell them they need to go on a weight loss diet or do this or that. There's a lot of research out there that shows that pursuing weight loss doesn't equate to a health gain. And for most people who are going on weight loss diets or programs or anything like that, they end up regaining the weight and then some eventually. And what I see in practice is that people get really sucked in and very narrow-minded on the weight and calories and portions and things like that. And their health is really suffering, or their nutrition is really suffering. And for some folks, there's also a very slippery slope into disordered eating. And menopause is a time where eating disorder risk goes up. If you think of it as those big body change times in people's lives, puberty, pregnancy, menopause, hormonally driven body changes, we're also at risk for things like eating disorders. And so, especially in menopause, we hear so much about the need to preserve muscle mass, the need to preserve bone mass. Well, when we're losing weight, we're tearing down our body's tissues, and we can't just selectively lose fat. We're also losing some muscle. We're also losing some bone. We can try to mitigate that by doing, lifting heavy weights 3 times a week, eating high protein. Yes, that's important. But in my experience, it's so much more impactful for folks and more sustainable to focus on actual health behaviors and health outcomes and nutrition and, sleep and hydration and stress management and, thinking of nutrition in an abundance way, right? How can I get enough protein? How can I get enough calcium? How can I get enough fiber versus, always trying to limit things. And, I just want to say it's totally understandable why folks, are terrified of the body changes that are very natural that come with hormone shifts and menopause, just because of the culture we live in and the pressures that we have on our bodies. So it's a really hard time. People can feel very disembodied, body changes. They can feel very uncomfortable and unfamiliar and feeling like, oh my gosh, I need to do something about this. I have clients coming to me very panicky, or even changes in blood lipid levels that happen naturally with the hormone shifts. And people feel like I'm doing something wrong, or I need to make these big changes. I'm in trouble here.
Diet culture, intuitive eating, and ways to build a healthier relationship with food. We will be right back with Taylor Wolfram and her journey discovering a passion for nutrition and plant-based eating and her approach for achieving the best health outcomes for her patients, along with what it means to have a healthy relationship with food. Our conversation with Taylor Wolfram will continue after this. What does retirement really look like? I used to picture it as hammocks, golf carts, maybe a daily crossword. But I'll be honest, when I first started thinking seriously about investing for retirement, I felt overwhelmed, and I wasn't alone. Did you know that nearly half of people aged 55 to 65 have nothing set aside for retirement? That is a big number. But here's the good news. It's not too late, and starting small still makes a difference. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns. Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start investing for your retirement, because the sooner you start, the more of a chance your money has to grow. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns recommends a diversified IRA portfolio that can help you weather all of the market's ups and downs. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the money you have right now. You'd be surprised at what just $5 a day could do. Plus, sign up for Acorns Gold today, and you'll get a 3% IRA match on new contributions in your first year. That's extra money for your retirement on Acorns. You've heard me talk about Acorns before, and it's made a real difference in how I think about money. I've even used it to invest for my grandson. It's quick, it's automatic, and it gives me a little more peace of mind. Sign up now and join the over 1 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $2.2 billion for their retirement with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/NOB or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investment involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/NOB. Taylor Wolfram is our guest today, a registered dietitian focused on weight inclusivity. Again, I love that term, Taylor Wolfram. And We so appreciate your time and all your hard work on this subject. I want to talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions around plant based diet. I guess the first is in my own research, I found kind of the terms interchangeable between plant based diet and veganism. Are they one and the same?
Such a great question. No, they're not. So,
Yeah.
like I said before, there is no standard definition of plant based. Some folks on one end of the spectrum think it means eating only whole plant foods, so not even like a processed vegan chicken nugget. On the other end of the spectrum, folks say, "Oh, it's just a diet, quote unquote, based on plants." So if I'm eating majority plants, but then sometimes I have salmon and a beef burger or whatever, right? So it really runs the gamut. So it depends on the person. And like I mentioned before, you can benefit, from the health and nutrition benefits of plant foods, even if you're still eating some animal foods. The term vegan is more of like a political, philosophical term around animal rights and, not eating any animals, because you believe it's harmful and cruel. And it also extends beyond food. It impacts things like the products you use, the clothes you wear, things like that. So the term vegan is usually attached more to a lifestyle and a belief system, whereas plant-based is really just more of like a dietary term that's a little bit fuzzy. So depending on how it's used, it might mean different things.
Yeah, good. Well, again, thank you for that. So, in your work, how do you kind of break down some of those rules and barriers so that people can work this into their diet and put some of the philosophy, to work for them, but actually the practical purpose behind this too?
That's so important. That's exactly right. So I always meet people where they are. I like to start with, what are the foods that you like to eat? What are
Mhm.
plant-based foods that you like to eat now? And even, earlier in life, are there meals that you remember having that you love that you just haven't had in a while? Also starting with familiar foods and maybe shifting them more plant-based. For example, like chili, we're coming out of winter here. It's like soup and chili season. Can you make a chili loaded with beans and lentils? Maybe still have a little meat in there, maybe no meat, something like that. Or, curries and stews and things like that that really lend themselves. Or you might already be used to eating with beans and lentils and plant proteins and things like that. I am a huge fan of tofu, and there can be a little bit of a learning curve. Some folks can be a little intimidated by it, but I promise it's actually really simple. It's a very versatile, affordable food. And so just getting familiar with it, doing some trial and error in the kitchen, trying some recipes. I mean, in today's age, like there's just so much available for free online in terms of resources around recipes and cooking tips and things like that. So start with what's familiar, start with what you like, and then work on little swaps. So when you are taking out animal foods, make sure you're replacing it. So think about substituting it, not just eliminating it, because we don't want to take away the protein, right? We just want to replace it. Or same with dairy, right? If you're not going to drink cow's milk anymore, drink calcium fortified soy milk. So you're still getting the protein, you're still getting that calcium and vitamin D. All the nutrition is very important.
How do we get past kind of this mindset that thinness is our objective? We've kind of talked about this idea of weight inclusivity. You also have another term that I really like. You talk about body liberation. And I think that all of that contributes to this idea of overall well being. Do you find that people want to embrace that? Are we just so rooted in this idea of being one specific form and shape that we can't even get past this? What do you tell people?
Yeah, my approach is very clear, on my website, and
Yeah.
I have the privilege to run my own private practice. So folks who come to see me, come to see me for that approach. But that doesn't mean that they're 100% all on board because of course, given our culture and no pun intended, the weight, right, that's put on us around
Yeah.
body size and appearance, it's natural for parts of us to still cling to that, to still desire to be thin or kind of meet these beauty ideals or, these cultural standards of what quote unquote looks healthy or fit or whatever. And so that's totally natural. And holding space for that is very important. Practicing self compassion with that, even doing some therapy and counseling around that. There are therapists who specialize in body image and disordered eating, like that is important. But also then getting in touch with the parts of yourself that are interested in an alternate approach, that are interested in focusing on what does matter to you? What does health mean to you? What does strength mean to you? What does vitality mean to you? What are your values around health and aging? How do you want to feel, right? What does nourished feel like to you? So really asking yourself these questions and seeing if you can align more of your behaviors with food towards those things rather than just, getting thin.
So many in our audience are focused on wellness, I think, and it's a natural kind of assumption to make that they're focused on exercise at the same time. Do you really think that the two go hand in hand around this subject, or are we going to be okay if we just have a nice balanced diet? I guess give us a little bit of a kind of a pat on the back for some that aren't natural exercisers.
Yeah, right. So exercise is of course important, bones, muscle, heart, lungs, as well as, flexibility and mobility, preventing falls, right? It's very important. Mental health, emotional health. We all know what it feels like, that little high we get, especially if we're
Yeah,
able to go for a walk outside and it's
yeah,
lovely weather.
yeah.
So it's important for a myriad of reasons, but that doesn't have to look like going to the gym and getting on a machine or lifting the weights there, right? Just like with food, start with what you like, start with what's familiar, start with what's joyful. I think so many of us hear, the rigid, like, exercise guidelines, like do strength training this many days a week and cardio this many days a week and flexibility. And it's sometimes can be overwhelming if we're nowhere close to that. So rather than just focusing on that and how unattainable that feels, start with what feels fun. Is it, doing a video at home in your living room, or is it going out to a class with your friends, or is it just getting on the local hiking trail? Whatever it is, start with what's fun. Yes, ideally, if we can work up to regular resistance training, that is so important for muscles and bones. That would be excellent. If we can get closer to those guidelines, great. But if we can get there in more of an intuitive way through things that are joyful for us or that we could make fun, like maybe you hate doing resistance training, but it's just something you do. I hate flossing my teeth, but I do it, right? For my
Right.
dental health. How could
Yeah.
you make it fun? Could you do it to music you like or with a friend or whatever it might be?
So as we, kind of get into this idea of fun and making it fun and moving ourselves a little bit, we might experience a little bit of muscle tenderness or some stress and strain. Maybe give us some tips on some really great plant-based foods that can help us with the inflammation or soreness or some of the issues that, might arise for those that are just now kind of getting back into exercise.
Yeah, so the thing with plant-based foods is, they're all loaded with phytochemicals, antioxidants, things like that. And you may have heard that old phrase, like eat the rainbow, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that is because all those different colors in plant foods are associated with different phytochemicals. And that can be a helpful, just little strategy to keep in mind, don't put too much pressure on yourself. But a lot of the times, if we're eating a well-rounded meal, meaning we've got, some protein, we've got our produce, we've got our, grain or starch and some fat in there. When we're eating meals that, have this balance of our food groups and we're eating them consistently throughout the day, we don't have to think so much about the individual nutrients and individual this and that, or counting grams or weighing or measuring. We really don't have to overcomplicate it. When we learn and get into a groove with, balanced eating and then appropriate dietary supplements, we don't have to worry too much about it. So folks often ask, like, what should I eat before and what should I eat after? Do I need protein shakes, this or that? It's like, hey, if you can eat a meal a couple hours before, great. And then if you can eat a meal like within 30 to 60 minutes finishing, that's awesome. Just having a well-rounded meal with a lot of different colors is great. I wouldn't stress too much about it.
That's great. Thank you. Taylor Wolfram's been our guest today. Taylor, you've been so generous. I really appreciate it. I just really have one final question, although I want to make sure and point out to our audience that we'll have links in our show notes so that our audience can find out more about Taylor, all of the wonderful work that the website offers. There's a class that I saw associated with Taylor Wolfram's work. Great stuff. Congratulations on all of your work. Nutrition, menopause. Obviously, Taylor is a registered dietitian, food expert. My final question is, take us out on a high note. What's the most powerful first step that you recommend to people kind of in just getting onto this journey of a plant-based diet and really kind of putting the food guilt behind us?
Yeah, gosh, I would say going back to that fun, right? What are foods that are fun for you, that you have positive memories associated with, that are tasty? If you think of like going to the farmer's market and getting like a perfectly ripe summer tomato, right? And that smell and that taste, can you find those foods that you genuinely enjoy and just load up your meals with them?
That's wonderful. Taylor Wolfram, so nice to talk to you. Selfishly, please come back. Talk to us again. I know our audience is going to be really interested. It's hard to really cover off on everything in 30 minutes. That's my fault, but you just have such great information. Congratulations on your work. And again, selfishly, please come back.
I'd be happy to.
That'd be great. Well, have a great rest of your day, Taylor. Thank you. My thanks to Taylor Wolfram and Prevention Magazine. My thanks to Acorns for sponsoring today's episode. Remember, Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start investing for your retirement. You can find out more in our show notes today. Check it out. My thanks to you, our wonderful audience here on radio and podcast. Be well, be safe. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show Prevention Magazine Healthy Living series on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Not Old Better Show Prevention Magazine Healthy Living interview series on radio and podcast. Join us again next time as we deep dive into some of the most fascinating real-life stories from across the world, all focused on this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show Prevention Magazine Healthy Living interview series on community radio.